What's happening, guys? How we doing? Welcome to the Truth Be Told podcast. In this podcast, I'm joined by the amazing Sky Elizabeth Coaching, who's going to tell us all about the female body. This is huge, this podcast. And guys, if you're listening to this, don't just turn off. Go tell your girlfriends, go tell your partners, go tell your wives, because they need to hear this, whether they exercise or they don't. If you aren't already following me, please subscribe to the Truth Be Told podcast. If you like this, please follow me on Instagram at InstaDanFitness or on Facebook at Dan Hancock, the Mental Health PT. Guys, this is a big one. Enjoy. Hi guys, how are we doing? Welcome to the Truth Be Told podcast. I'm joined by the amazing Sky Elizabeth. Sky's here to talk to us today all about the female body. We're going to talk about misconceptions. We're going to talk about the difference between males and females when it comes to your training, when it comes to nutrition. We're going to touch on PCOS, and we're going to talk about emotional eating and all this type of stuff. So Sky understands the female body better than I ever could have dreamed of, despite my trying in my teens and my early 20s. She is an absolute expert at this, and she really is a true visionary in her field. Hopefully you guys can take a lot away from this. So yeah, Sky, there's your introduction. How about you, 1 minute, tell the guys who are listening a little bit about you and your background.
Wicked, thank you. So yeah, I am a coach. I have been a coach for about 7 years now. Started as a personal trainer. So went through the same route that most personal trainers kind of go through, the level 2, level 3, not really getting taught an awful lot about what we actually need to know when we train people. And as I went through my career and kind of found these gaps in my knowledge, I kind of gravitated more towards females, and I just found that there was so much information lacking around the difference in men and females. And a lot of coaches, and myself included, were kind of taught to treat women as small men, and we're just not small men. That's not what we are. So that kind of piqued my interest. I ended up kind of only working with females. I still only work with females now. And also went down more of a nutrition route with my knowledge and my learning. So I studied to be certified nutritionist 2 years ago. And that really opened up a lot of kind of areas and corridors and things that people just don't really know about or talk about. And it actually was born out of me failing a couple of clients, female clients that had things like PCOS, or not really knowing a lot, despite having a menstrual cycle, not really knowing an awful lot about how it affects you. So yeah, that's kind of led me to now. I am now a online coach, and I work with females, specifically females with PCOS, and helping them with a relationship with food. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
Brilliant, amazing. So guys, when I posted on my Instagram that I was going to be doing this with Sky, one of my mates from back here sent me a message being like, "Oh my God, how do you know Sky?" So it turns out you used to be a little bit of a party animal, Sky.
I try and leave that bit out, Dan. Yeah, no, funnily enough, I say like I've been a coach for 7 years. I actually didn't train, or wasn't really an active person, shall we say, very much kind of longer than 7 years. So there's probably about 2 years previous to getting qualified that I actually started to take a little bit of an interest in my own health. So yeah, I was very much party animal, did not take care of my own health. I spent a summer in Greece, and that's where I met your friend Hannah. Some parties at early hours. So I ended up actually breaking my hip while I was in Greece, and it came down to my diet, my lifestyle, everything. I had, borderline osteoporosis, which is brittle bones, and that had caused me to basically break my hip with no real incident. So there was no real thing that happened. It was just like a kind of wear and tear. And I was only 21 at the time, so I was a bit of a freak case. When I went to the hospital back home, they were like, how has a 21-year-old broken their hip like an 80-year-old? So yeah, that was the kind of kick up the arse, if you will, that I got to sort my life out. Yeah. And that was kind of when I was like, right, I don't know where to start. There's so much information out there. I'm just going to go and do level 2 course around my work. Why not? I'll do it at my local college. And then loved it, got into health and fitness. I never really got into it for weight loss. That was a bit of a byproduct of just taking care of myself more. So yeah, I was very much this coach that was like, geez, if I, of all people, can change my life around, then anyone can. And I mean, anyone can. So I kind of took that with me with my values of, it doesn't matter where your starting point is, anybody can make a change.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I think it's so important as well because I'm quite open and honest with the guys about some of the stuff that I've been through as well. And basically, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I used to be a total dick, and just used to be like, no, but totally off the rails, totally neglected my health. And I think for coaches, not that we need to go through something like that, of course not. But I think if we can have that empathy of being able to relate to clients who may be in a bad place, sometimes we need to get to that bad place in order to then have that boot up the arse and then be like, right, we need to actually make a change now, and for it to be so dramatic as well, which has led on to us doing this. So we're going to have a little bit of an icebreaker. We're going to find out a little bit more about Sky. So we'll make this sort of quick, sharp, quick fire type thing. So Sky, first and foremost, tell me something that you're proud of.
Oof. I would probably say my career. It sounds boring, but my career. I think because when I started, I literally only had like GCSEs, A levels. I dropped out of uni, so I think people think I'm super academic. Yeah, and I've like been to uni and got a degree, and I actually haven't. So yeah, managing to get myself qualified and up to the point now certified. Yeah, that's what I'm proud of. There we go.
That's brilliant. Yeah. And this is so important as well because I've obviously, guys listening will know about my qualification that I've created, the mental health and exercise coaching, and the amount of people that message me every single day being like, well, what makes you qualified to do this? What makes you qualified to do that? I think I'm the only person that's dropped out of university that has then created the qualification. But it's about so much of this you learn on the job as well. And like Sky mentioned earlier on, it's you actually dealing with these clients with PCOS, dealing with some people and you didn't actually 100% know the answers. Yeah, it might be a little bit risky going in when you're not 100% confident with these things, but how else are we going to learn? It's such an important part of the job. Sky, what is your biggest regret?
I have a tattoo on my foot that says Wreckhead. No joke. Hannah will know about this. I got this in Greece, and I've tried to cover it up with another tattoo, and it just keeps coming through. So you can just see this. Yeah, I'll have to send you a photo of it. So you
permanent reminder. I'll send me it, and I'm going to get this put up on the YouTube. Right. If you were on your deathbed today, what advice would you give to future kids or grandkids?
Oh, okay. One of the best
pieces. Good one, isn't it? It's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the best pieces of advice I've ever had, because I'm a super impulsive person, very reactive. I've got ADHD, so I go 1,000 miles an hour. But someone once told me, don't make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. I think that's something that has really stuck with me. And whenever I'm thinking about something, I'm about to do something, I try and pull myself back and think, am I actually doing this based on what I want or just about what I feel now? So yeah, I think that'd be something that I would tell people.
Yeah, cool. I like that one. That's a good one. Right, we're going to have a very quick fire true or false.
Oh, okay? God,
okay. Right, just what we'll do is I'll say true or false. Give me a true or false. And if I want context or you to expand, I'll ask for context. Right? Okay. Putting you on the spot, you'll be fine. Okay, true or false, males should train differently to females?
True.
True. Okay, context. Why? Quick.
Well, firstly, females can recover better than men. I don't care what you say. So we can actually handle a little bit more volume. So there's one key difference. From an aesthetic point of view, obviously women aren't going to train to get a bigger chest. We tend to want bigger legs and bigger glutes. So I think in that case, we would probably train different. And I train my clients differently based on that. Yeah, I think that's the main key differences for me.
Yeah. Okay, cool. What are three? I had a couple of true or falses, but I'm cautious of time, so actually I quite like this one as well. What are three things, if you can think of them, don't worry, one or two is fine, that you currently dislike about the fitness industry? Or if we don't want to be as strong as dislike, three things maybe that you want to change or have an impact on?
I dislike the amount of coaches that put a lot of emphasis on calorie counting as the sole tool and means for fat loss. I absolutely 100% think people need to know the message, it's calories in versus calories out. Everyone should know about energy balance. But I think a lot of coaches can cause problems, and especially seeing as I work with a lot of women that have these bad relationships with food, and some of them come to me and they absolutely feel like they cannot count calories. So it's not a tool that I actually use a lot of my clients. So that's one thing that kind of grinds my gears a little bit, because not everybody has the knowledge, the capacity, or the time to be counting calories, and you need to have other methods to help people reach their goals.
Yeah.
I think another one is obviously the amount of freaking influencers that get a few thousand followers and then promote something and everybody buys into it, rather than investing in a coach that has the knowledge and the capacity to actually help you make a change that sticks. That really fucking grinds my gears.
Yeah.
And then third one, I think it's people that use transformation photos, but like really short space, like, like a week. And they're like, look at
Yeah.
the changes that this person's made in a week. And it might be like they've reduced bloating or they're not holding as much water. And they're like, they've lost 7 pounds. And there's not enough context. And I think it can be quite misleading. So I actually like transformation photos. My clients use them. I don't really post them.
Yeah.
But if there's like a good time gap and there's context about what they've done, but I think sometimes they're a bit misleading. So they're the things that are like grinding my gears a little bit.
Yeah. No, I like all them. In the last podcast, when I spoke to Chris Bradley, the Glasgow PT, obviously one of the main focuses was on body image and transformation pictures and that type of thing. That was the main thing he said. It's context. He said if he's posting the before and after picture, he said he's received a message of like a paragraph of them saying about how they feel. So, and it's all about context and what you put with it, which is massively important. One of the main things that I don't do in my body and mind program, just because I'm being awkward and being weird and different, is we don't do before and after pictures at all, because we try and obviously just make it over through the mind. And a lot of people think that I have something against before and after pictures. I have something against the ones that are done wrong. And because, as we're going to discuss in a little bit, I don't want people to associate their confidence and their self-worth with the way that they look. I want it to be deeper than that. But let's flip it on its head. Of course, we're going to feel a little bit more confident if we're a little bit happier with the way we look. So it's all about finding that balance. So Sky, we're probably going to have a lot of females listening into this, women, young girls, wanting to know a little bit about what considerations they need to be making when it comes to the training, when it comes to their nutrition, because this is something that isn't spoken about enough. And I remember it was James Smith that first kind of spoke about this like taboo topic. And it was, I remember this was years ago, and he was basically just being like, you need to know these things about your female clients. And the very next week, I went into Pure Gym with some of my female clients. I was like, okay, tell me, when is your time of the month? I need to know these things.
And they were like, what?
They're like, fucking hell, Dan, stop drinking. It was, but it was important, and it is so important. There are key considerations with regards to when we should be strength training, when we should potentially be taking some time off, when we just need to actually realize that we are probably going to have more cravings, and I'm saying we here, but females probably are going to have more cravings, probably are going to need to snack. But instead of repressing this, we need to actually kind of accept it and then work around it so that we don't derail ourselves. So do you want to just dive in? I'm going to let Sky kind of take the floor here and delve into this, guy. So yeah, give us some of your insights, Sky.
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. So I think first thing to say is, if you are a female listening to this and thinking, man, like I go through this every month and I don't know a lot about it, like you are not alone. I get a lot of clients that come to me that don't know the things that we end up talking about. And for me, it's only been the last few years that I actually even tracked my cycle. Like I could not tell you 2 years ago when I was due on, when the first day was, when the last day was, how long they lasted, none of that. And I just kind of accepted that it was a part of me. Like, oh, sometimes I'm really moody and sometimes I'm really hungry, but it just, it just comes and goes. And I'm just a woman, so I deal with it. And I never really worked with my body. And my clients now, we tend to try and work with their bodies rather than against them. Like, I'm really sorry to say, but you guys have got it so fucking easy because you don't have this massive change in hormones throughout the month. You're pretty stable. Not to say that you don't have,
no, it's true. You're right.
Challenges, but we've got it times 10. So generally speaking, a cycle can last between around 25 to like 33 days. So it's quite a big gap. So we always speak of the cycle general terms in like 28 days, so 1 month. But if you're tracking your cycle and you're like, oh my God, mine's 33, that's totally normal. It's different for every female and every cycle is different. So day 1 is the first day of your period. So first day of menstruation, that's when your cycle starts, just to clarify, because some people don't know that. We try and break up the cycle into 2 key phases. So the first phase is our follicular phase. And then the second phase is what we call luteal phase. So if we're going to talk about it in 28 days, your follicular phase is kind of 1 day to 14. And then the luteal, 15 to 28. So talking about the first half when we have our period, this is actually the better half of our cycle, the better half of the month for us. In this phase, we are estrogen dominant. So once we kind of get the first few days of our period out of the way, we can actually feel pretty mega. Like I know in myself, especially when I'm training in the gym, I kind of get this like urge. I feel a little bit like Wonder Woman. I'm like, yeah, I want to smash some weights, which sounds so counterintuitive because you think when you're on your period and you've got these cramps and stuff, you might feel actually shocking. And you probably do for the first few days when your cramps are quite bad. But coming out of that, we get these peak feelings of motivation and mood. And we really want to kind of make the most of that. We've also kind of got a better ability to adapt and recover from our training. So when we're thinking about training, it might be worth taking advantage of this and front loading some of the volume and intensity of the training. If you're somebody that is strength training and you do test 1 rep maxes, 3 rep maxes, whatever it might be, you might want to try and get that testing week in the first 2 weeks where you're feeling the best. There might be like a 10-day period within that when right, this is when I really smash my training out. And that's something that obviously if you've got a coach or you're just tracking your cycle yourself, you want to start making a note of. So increased ability to recover and to adapt, which is obviously what we want to be making the most of. And if you're somebody that's dieting, this might be a chance to hit the dieting a little bit harder. And I know that might sound weird to some people because we've got this whole idea of slow and steady wins the race, but actually, aggressive dieting and aggressive deficits for the right person can really work. So if you're somebody that just wants to get in and out real quickly, you might look at your month and go, right, I'm going to hit my deficit harder because I'm going to have more motivation. I'm going to feel quite good. I'm not going to have this spike in hunger in this part of my month. So I'm going to increase my deficit and then I can pull back the rest of the month. That's something that I do with a lot of my female clients is I don't just give them like, if they track calories, that is, I don't say to them, right, we're just going to go 1800 every day. I'll go, right, okay, if it averages out over the week, over the month, let's go with how you feel and what you think. If there's days when you're feeling super motivated and you aren't feeling hungrier, let's try and kind of work with that. When there's days when you are feeling hungrier, let's just increase, because we know that fat loss isn't something that happens over a 24-hour period. It happens over weeks and over the month. So definitely look at working with that. So first half follicular phase, all the good stuff, all the good stuff. Potentially front loading the volume and intensity of your training, maybe even in like increasing the days that you train if you can, time dependent. If you're dieting, take advantage of that. And also you're going to recover better from your training. And then we go into the luteal phase. And this is where we tend to be more progesterone dominant. So that's the other female sex hormone. This is when we get an increase in PMS. So mood disturbances, we'll call them. We have obviously a decrease in performance and recovery. And again, this is not to say that this is definitely what will happen for you. You might track your cycle and find that you don't actually notice much of a change. And that's normal. Some women don't. And some of my clients don't ever change their training or what they do with their nutrition because they don't feel they need to. But if you track your cycle and you do find that this happens, then you'll know why. And it is fairly normal. So this might be the time where you do potentially, maybe for like 5 or 7 or 10 days, reduce a bit of your volume, reduce a bit of your intensity, bit of a deload week in this part. And then cravings is a really interesting one because I think a lot of women think that they're just like hormonal and mental. They're like, oh my God, I just want chocolate. But actually in the week and the like 10 to 7 days leading up to your period again, we do actually get a physiological increase in our basal metabolic rate. So it tends to be between 8 to 16%, which kind of comes out at about like 200 calories max. But that feeling of like wanting to eat more is not psychological, it's actually physiological. So if you have that, just bear in mind that you actually do have a little bit of room there if you want to eat a little bit more on a few days. So instead of like fighting yourself and being like, no, you can't eat, you're dieting or you're trying to maintain or whatever you're trying to do, just say to your coach or even to yourself, like, you know what, I'm just going to have a couple extra 100 calories of chocolate or Nutella on toast or whatever you want to fit into it. And if you are dieting, even maybe going up to maintenance and then adding on that extra 200 is going to give you a lot more room to play with. And it's just going to help with the main thing that we need people to do is adhere to what they're doing. If you're fighting yourself constantly and then you don't tell your coach and your coach's like, no, right, just stick to this, what we're doing, you're not changing anything, and then you go and kind of allow yourself to have a little bit of a snack and then maybe the wheels fall off because you feel like you failed, it just can lead to quite a negative cycle. So if that's you and you do feel that massive spike in hunger, then just make room for it. If you don't want to make room for it and you know you get hungrier, but you've got this goal and you're dead set on getting it, then this is a time when you want to really manage your appetite and your hunger. So things like increasing your protein and your fiber intake, making your meals like bigger volume but less energy is going to be key to helping you feel fuller. And also finding some tools to manage stress, because we do have this PMS, this potential for mood disturbance. You know, I've like cried at an ice cream tub not being open before. Like, that's how bad it gets sometimes. Having some different ways to just relax, chill out, take care of your brain that aren't food, because we do have this increased potential risk of emotional eating. And I'm not saying emotional eating is bad, and I know we're probably going to touch on this later, but it can be problematic. And if it's something that you don't want to go into and something you've had problems with before, this is the time of the month when you really need to think about what helps you relax, whether it's a nice bubble bath, whether it's journaling, whether it's meditating, whatever it is. We want to have more tools in our toolbox than simply food, although food is also fine. So yeah, that's the key points about the menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
Um,
I think one of the key things here is educating people on this, because wasn't it amazing? So just to give you a little bit of context, guys, Sky came and did a talk for my body and mind clients the other week about all this sort of stuff in a lot more depth, sort of inside out. And it was amazing how many of the females were just like, oh my God, like I never knew this. And but which is totally fine, not just this that they should, it's but when it comes to training and fitness, one of the main things, think about all the things that could derail individuals, females but and males, but in this instance females, coming into the gym trying to lift something heavy, and then not being able to, and then thinking there's something wrong, thinking they've lost strength. Luckily, if they have one of us as a coach, they know the reasons for that. And then with regards to the eating as well, I know even with regards to Amy, it'll be then feel guilty for having that period, then eating more, and then they think, oh, that's it, it's ruined, the month is ruined, my dieting's out the window, and this, that, and the next thing. So education on this is so important, but it's also this acceptance of female body is different to the males, females emotions is different to the males. How important is it for you to be getting this message out?
Yeah, I think it's really important. And you know what? I put a post up about it quite a while ago, and I put like a meme on it, and it was like based at male coaches. It was like poking a bit of fun, like at male coaches, like, you know that we get periods, but we know that you don't know a lot about it. And honestly, I think it had about 500 saves. And the amount of guys commenting that were like, this is amazing. Like, this is the stuff that we need to know. Because I feel like as much as the client can feel like they've failed, I don't know if you've ever had this, but as a male coach, you might just feel like you're smashing your head against the brick wall with some of your female clients. And it makes you feel like you're a bad coach because you aren't helping them, or you can't help them, or they seem to be missing something that is holding them up and not quite getting the results that they want. Whereas if you have this information, it's just about setting expectations. You can turn around and, like, let's say, for instance, in the luteal phase, because we've got a little bit more of a shift in hormones, we tend to retain more water leading up to our period, and we get more weight fluctuations in this period. If you can arm your clients with that knowledge, it's going to stop them from stepping on the scales and going, oh my God, I've gained 6 pounds. What have I done? I'm not doing everything right. And it can also say to you, because you might be going, what the hell has she done? How has she gained 6 pounds? But then you go, actually, you know that in this part of your period, in this part of your cycle, you do retain more water, you're going to have more weight fluctuations. Let's not stress about it. Let's see what it is next week. That can really help keep somebody motivated. So I think it's really important. Yeah, like you say.
Yeah, it's huge. And again, like I said, it was only until a couple of years ago. So let's actually say I'd probably been coaching for 3 years until I actually started to take it upon myself to learn about this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And there would have been so many instances as a coach that I'll hold my hands up that I probably wouldn't have known the answers. So this is massive. And again, this is why I brought Sky in to speak to some of my guys about it, because I would have felt confident giving a talk on it. It wouldn't have been anywhere near the quality of yours, but I do know the ins and outs. I thought it was important for a female to do it as well, and I don't think that that's a backwards mindset. I don't know at all. I know, hand on heart, that my girls on my program would have felt probably a lot more comfortable and at ease, and just being able to relate a little bit more to you being able to explain this. So yeah, guys, if you aren't already, go follow Sky Elizabeth Coaching on Instagram. Some of her insights on this type of stuff are huge. One of the other topics that we spoke about with my team was PCOS, and this term is being thrown. Well, this condition is thrown about all the time now. It's suddenly coming out of the woodwork. People are suddenly starting to talk about it, and which I think is absolutely amazing. Yeah. Sky knows a lot more about this inside out. So, guys, if this is something that you have, or this is something that you want to know a little bit more about, Sky's going to dive in and tell you some of the key considerations for this, and just kind of educate you a little bit more on polycystic ovary syndrome.
Yeah, wicked. Again, this is something that I didn't really learn too much about until doing my nutrition qualification. There was a lecture in there and it was fascinating. And I had a client about a year before that who had PCOS. And it's one of these things where in the consultation, they tell you, I've got this condition. You go and Google it. Polycystic ovary syndrome. You think, all right, cool. Well, it's just an ovary syndrome. That doesn't really, it's not going to, there's no symptoms that maybe, are going to affect the way that she trains. It's not like she has an injury or something that's going to stop her doing things. And when I'd seen her in person, she was totally able, no injuries, nothing. When I spoke to her about what exercise she couldn't do, nothing came up. So in my head, it's a condition she's told me about, not going to affect the way that she eats and trains. And I could not have been more wrong. And I ended up really failing her. She never got results. Like, she came to me for fat loss. I was the kind of go-to person for it, and we never saw a single movement. And she was doing everything to the dot. So that really, I was like shook. I was like, oh my God, how has this happened? And it wasn't until I started to look into PCOS when I was like, oh, he's such a fucking, not that I'm calling anybody an idiot that doesn't know, but just for me, like, I should have gone further than a quick Google search. And it's something that isn't spoken about because it's actually really hard to diagnose. And I know a lot of women that, and I've got clients that aren't actually diagnosed as having PCOS, but we are 99.9% certain that they do. Mm-hmm. So to overview PCOS, so polycystic ovarian syndrome, there is a criteria that we use. It's the most accepted kind of criteria to diagnose it. It's called the Rotterdam criteria. So it says that you must have 2 or more of these kind of 3 criteria to have polycystic ovary syndrome. So you need to, 1, have cysts on your ovaries. But not everybody that has PCOS has cysts, which is really interesting. So you can have the cysts without the syndrome, and you can have the syndrome without the cysts. Or you have irregular or no periods. So that's a telltale sign that you might have PCOS. And then the third one is what we call hyperandrogenism, which is basically elevated male hormones. So you would literally get your hormones tested and they would see that you would have like elevated testosterone and growth hormone and stuff like that. So they're the kind of key signs. So you could have no period and cysts and you would have the syndrome. You could have this elevated male hormones and no period and you could have the syndrome. So that's how we define it. One thing to point out as well is that sometimes women can go to the doctor with a missed period or an irregular period, and it can actually be wrongly diagnosed. There's something called hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is when you lose your period. And this can come from mainly from stress. So it can be psychological, but it can be physical as well. So it can be like chronic undereating, or it can be chronic overtraining, or it can be all 3. So if you are somebody that's lost your period or is having an irregular period and you're exercising a lot and you're maybe dieting, it might be a telltale sign from your body that you need to A, stop training so much, and B, get your energy up. So that's just something I want to throw in there because these things can be wrongly diagnosed for each other. So the main thing that PCOS affects is obviously reproductive system. So you've got menstrual dysfunction. This is mainly caused by these elevated male hormones. It can lead to infertility and pregnancy complications. So that's one of the key reasons why women come to me and work with me, is because they don't want to be infertile. They want to be able to have children. They don't want to have this worry about pregnancy complications. So that's one main reason why we want to kind of reduce these symptoms, because we can reduce symptoms and we can reverse some of this negative health impacts that we're having from PCOS. The next one is metabolic dysfunction. So this is the thing that tripped me up and trips a lot of people up, that women with PCOS tend to be insulin resistant, very similar to type 2 diabetes. And they also have a reduced BMR. Most women with PCOS have a lower than normal BMR. So if you were going to use a kind of calorie counter, a calorie calculator and go, right, okay, what's my calories? What's my TDE? We know that number's not an exact science anyway, but you can probably expect it to be 15 to 40% lower than healthy populations, which is mental. And like 40% is a kind of extreme case that has been seen in the literature, but you probably want to assume that you've got about 15% of a lower BMR. So take the calories that you're at now, drop it by 15%, and then monitor. And this is what I did with my client. So I thought she was in a deficit. She was actually just sitting at maintenance, but I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And then another one is psychological. So PCOS is renowned for, not just causing, but it can even, worsen some psychological kind of issues going on, or, anxiety, depression. And I think as well, what comes with PCOS is some women have this feeling that they've tried everything and nothing will work. And even women with PCOS don't fully understand. A lot of the messages I get aren't just from coaches, it's from women going, what should I do? What do I need to go with now? And there's a lot of kind of pseudoscience around PCOS. If you go on Google and put in like PCOS diet, so much shit comes up. Yeah. And even doctors, like a lot of my clients have gone to doctors and they go, right, you need to cut out gluten, you need to cut out dairy, and you're probably going to have to take metformin to get pregnant. And it's just not the case. So the basic thing that we want to do in PCOS is we are trying to increase this insulin sensitivity because we've got this insulin resistance, and reduce these symptoms. And weight loss in itself will reduce all symptoms, but obviously not all women want weight loss, and that's not always something that you want to just focus on. So there's some key things that you can focus on to kind of improve these symptoms. So in terms of insulin resistance and diet, we know that energy restriction will improve insulin sensitivity, but it's looking at how do you set that diet up. So the first thing to do is assume that you've got a lower BMR, which sucks, but as long as you can get that in your head and accept it, it's going to make it easier to make a plan rather than feeling like you're constantly fighting. So assume that you have a lower BMR. It's going to take a bit of period of monitoring because you're not going to know, there's no way to measure how much of a reduction you've got. It's not something that you can go to the doctor and say, can you tell me how much my BMR dropped? Well, you're not going to know. So assume that you have. People always tend to think that with insulin resistance, you need to like go low carb or no carb, and that's just not the case. Lower carb may help. It may help. But when I say lower carb, you're still getting around 40% of your daily energy from carbs. So it's not like low carb, it's not keto. And keto can actually worsen your symptoms. Not something that I ever recommend to normal people, never mind women with PCOS. Especially when you think that women with PCOS are a population that are probably already at risk of eating disorders because they feel so helpless. You don't want to then put them on a ketogenic diet, which is super, super restrictive. So looking at your carb intake, potentially lowering it, maybe bracketing it around your training. That might help because that's when we're going to have a little bit of an increase in insulin sensitivity. Because we're training, it might be easier to shuttle the food into where we want it to go, into the muscle cells, and use it for energy. There is some cool research around, lower GI carbs, so lower glycemic index carbs, so more fruit, more veg, more whole grains, but that is just obvious stuff. We want to be eating in general less refined and processed foods and having more of these low GI carbs. Lean PCOS, so there is women that out there that don't have as much insulin resistance, which means that we can still get energy into the muscle cells. It's the fat cells that are resistant, so then you're not really gaining as much fat. They can probably tolerate a little bit more carbs. Not that you can't tolerate carbs when you've got PCOS, but it's worthwhile thinking that you could probably get away with having some more. Getting some monounsaturated fats in there, definitely. So olive oils, avocado, nuts. That's had some real good research around it in improving insulin sensitivity. Again, because this is the thing that we want to be doing, improving insulin sensitivity. And what we do tend to see sometimes is that women with PCOS have like a bit of metabolic inflexibility, we call it. So the body doesn't really burn fuels as efficiently as it would normally. So it has a bit of a derangement in where at night we tend to oxidize fat. When we're sleeping, in women with PCOS, they oxidize protein. So we've got this potential for muscle loss. So that might be something that you think about, increasing your protein intake overall and maybe having some protein before you go to sleep at night. But other than that, there's no research that you need to take out gluten. I think when women have taken gluten out of their diet, in any diet or with PCOS, and they've then lost weight, it's not because of the gluten, it's because the foods that they were eating with gluten in have reduced their energy.
Yeah.
And then with dairy, I think I posted about this the other day. There was one study, it looked at low dairy, low starch. It was an 8-week intervention, but there was no other control group. These women just lost weight on this diet. So it's like, well, did they lose it from cutting out the dairy? Did they lose it from cutting out the starch? Or did they lose it from cutting out the calories? There's no way to say. So this is where I think doctors just go on Google and go, no gluten, no dairy, there you go. And it's just a freaking nightmare, because I know loads of women that have done that and it's not made any difference. So I think just being sensible, being balanced, you don't need to restrict. It's like, instead of thinking, what can I take out? Think of what you need to add in. More protein, more low GI carbs, some kind of healthy fats in there, and a regular eating pattern is going to be the best thing for you. In terms of training, obviously resistance training and high impact training are going to improve insulin sensitivity. So probably favoring that over your steady state and your low intensity. Which is a bit out there to say, but we're looking at people's health. We're not trying to just kind of get people to lose a bit of weight steadily. It's like, what can we get the most bang for the buck? Strength training anyway, which is something that I'm sure we all advocate. And then, some more high intensity kind of training. It's just going to improve that glucose disposal, is what we want to do with women with PCOS. You can find that you've got a bit of impaired appetite control, meaning when you have a meal and we get this normal dip in appetite and those hormones reduce, we sometimes don't see that in women with PCOS. So being mindful around that and finding ways to try and make these meals, again, full of volume, full of fiber, trying to help yourself to feel less hungry, basically. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell when it comes to diet. I think the other thing that is a big, massive non-negotiable for me now is inositol. So inositol is a supplement. It's basically a form of carbohydrate. People go, oh my God, what is it? Is it dangerous? Is it bad? Like, is it a chemical? You can go and research inositol. Myo-inositol is the one that you want to be taking. You can get it from MyProtein. You can get it from bulk powders. It's really cheap. You want to be looking at about 2 to 4 milligrams a day for a minimum of 6 months. And this improves all symptoms. So insulin sensitivity, it can help with fertility. A lot of my clients have got regular cycles back from taking this. And it can also help with some of the psychological problems, like a reduction in anxiety. So all of these things, every woman that I've worked with that have used this have reported these things improving with inositol. It's just magic. It's like this unicorn supplement that, I'm not one that goes and throws supplements at people. I'd rather get things through their diet and improve lifestyle rather than going, right, let's chuck the kitchen sink at it. But something about inositol, it's magical. So if you are thinking, I want to read into it a little bit more, obviously my go-to is examine.com. Go and jump on there, type it in. It will give you all the research around it. There's so much data and then anecdotal of people that have used it and been like, wow, this is crazy. So they're the key things. And that's a bit of an overview of PCOS. And I think another key thing to point out is, if you have PCOS, it's not your fault. And a lot of women that have PCOS are overweight. Being overweight did not cause PCOS. PCOS probably caused you to be overweight. So it's not your fault. Have that compassion, have that patience. You're not broken, and you don't need to do any ridiculous restrictive diet. You just need a little bit more patience with yourself, with your process, and you're going to probably have to try a little bit harder.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And guys, it's just so important. Like, isn't that's just, hopefully some of you will be like, oh my God, I didn't know like any of this, but I think it's important for all of us to know, obviously for coaches to know, but if there's any, I don't know if there's any guys listening to this, I'm going to do a wee intro at the start and actually encourage guys to refer their partners and husbands and everyone on to be listening to this. It's huge. And it's this lack of knowledge. And this is why me and Sky will be banging our heads against a brick wall, every single day or every single week with certain things, because this industry just revolves around weight loss. Even the term weight loss isn't probably correct. We probably shouldn't even be using that term anymore. I always beat myself up when I say it now rather than saying fat loss. And not to discredit any GPs or any other coaches or anything like that, but it's just this one, lack of real knowledge, but then two, abundance of false information that's tripping people up. And when I don't know whether this is the case for you, Sky, but when females approach me and they say, "Oh, I've tried this, I've tried that, I've tried that," like a lot of coaches would be like, "Oh, it's excuses or whatever." Or they've just not tried it each one. I'm kind of like, well, of course people jump ship from something to something else. They're being fed all this different information. Like,
Yeah.
even like I said, even the term weight loss like isn't right. And with things like Split, Slimming World and Weight Watchers and all this type of things and all these different types of diets, we can open up a whole fucking can of worms here. Don't, if you have to feel as if you have tried everything and nothing has worked yet, do not beat yourself up. It's probably just that you haven't been taught the right way yet, or you need to discover a little bit more about your body. That was amazing. Thank you. So very quickly, Sky, what I just want to quickly talk about emotional eating. I want to talk about eating when you're hungry, or the feeling of hunger, or the feeling of real hunger, and when you're just wanting to snack. So share some of your insights on this for the guys.
Yeah, so emotional eating, I think, is a bit of a buzzword at the minute, I'm not saying that in a negative way. I think it's kind of cool that more people are speaking about this, because I think it used to be very much like taboo, like a lot of subjects. It was like, especially in like the bro bodybuilding world, it's like, oh, you know, I felt a bit crap last night. I had some chocolate or ice cream. A kind of bro science or bro bodybuilder coach would be like, you know, go hard, go home, like try harder. What are you doing? So it's nice that we are more accepting, especially in the time that we're in. We're in a frigging pandemic. Like, of course, we're going to be comforting ourselves a little bit with food. So I think one of the key things that I kind of try and instill in my clients is it's okay to get comfort from food, as long as that's not the only place that you're getting comfort, and as long as it's not problematic, and as long as you're actually letting that food comfort you. If you get into a crap mood or you had a stressful day and you go, oh, you know what, I'm just going to go and have my favorite cookie and a bit of ice cream, and then you start berating yourself and you start making yourself feel guilty, and then before you know it, you're eating the full pack of cookies because, well, you know, you're obviously scum of the earth, because who eats cookies when they feel sad? Nobody. It's like, that is a ridiculous mindset to have. So emotional eating is okay. Yeah. Let comfort food comfort you. But I think it's key to know the difference between physical hunger and emotional hunger. So, you know, physical hunger is quite a slow process. It, like, the onset of physical hunger is fairly slow. You can feel like a little bit of rumbling in your tummy, gradually gets worse and worse. And then if you let it, it gets to a point where you're like, shit, man, I'm ravenous. I need to eat now. Whereas with emotional hunger, it is sudden and it is normally triggered by something. And it might be a shitty email that you've read that makes you anxious. It might be an argument that you have. It might be just something that you see on social media that triggers you and triggers a feeling in you. And then all of a sudden you've got this kind of emotional hunger. When it's physical hunger, you will want a variety of foods. Have you ever sat in a restaurant hungry and not been able to choose what you want on the menu? You're like, oh my God, everything sounds so amazing. With emotional hunger, it tends to be specific for one food, one thing. It's like a bit of a craving. Physical hunger can peak at usual times. It will be in tune with your internal body clock. So if you're somebody that eats every day at 7 a.m., you find one day you get up at 7 a.m. and you don't have breakfast, you are hungry. Your body knows. You can obviously get yourself out of that by over time not eating at that time, and your body will adjust. But it will peak at usual times: breakfast, lunch, dinner. Emotional hunger can come on at any time, and it might be a really random time, and that's when you can kind of go, I've just eaten, now I feel hungry. Is this really hunger, or has something triggered me? With physical hunger, a lot of people, now not everybody and not in every situation, but when we are in tune and honoring our hunger and we understand that we are hungry, we tend to stick and eat to fullness. When it's emotional, it's very easy to overeat, and there tends to be no sense of satisfaction because it's not real hunger, it's emotional. So you've gone to the cookie jar and there's more, and you're just eating and eating and eating until you get to the point where you're like, oh, I feel sick. That tends to be more emotional hunger and emotional eating. And then with that will come this real big feeling of guilt and shame that you've eaten this food. And we don't tend to get that when we're just eating when we're hungry. we don't really tend to get this sense of, oh my God, I'm so ashamed of just ate my breakfast. Do you know what I mean? It's totally different. One thing to point out is people love to use overeating and binge eating interchangeably. And now binge eating is quite a big word for me because it's obviously attached to binge eating disorder, and a period of overeating, or even, you know, one kind of time in the day that you might overeat and get to a point where you're past fullness, that is not a binge. That is just a overeating episode. And lots of people do that. That is really normal. Binge eating tends to be, and I'm talking like a really ridiculous amount of food in a very short space of time. So a few thousand calories maybe. It comes with a complete lack of control. Like emotionally eating is more mindless. It's like, yeah, you've got your hand in your cookie jar. You kind of know that you're doing it, but you kind of don't. With binge eating, people that have binge eating disorder, they report a complete lack of self-control. They cannot stop. It's like there's a red mist and it's just go, eat. Tends to be done in secret. So you're not sitting around your family in front of the TV, you're doing it on your own. And it's a really, really distressing experience. And to be classed as having binge eating disorder, you probably do this 1 to 3 times a week for like 3 months. That's when you need to seek help. If you're somebody that just overeats, which is probably a bit more mindless, on an evening, even if it's every evening, like just ask yourself, like, are you really eating that much? Or are you just having a little bit of extra cake? Are you having like a few more biscuits? Are you eating a full tub of Pringles? Because that's not a binge. And I think people need to really rein that in when they are talking to themselves, because that can be problematic in itself. If you're like, oh, I just can't stop binge eating, it's like you just mindlessly eating, or you're emotionally eating. So some things that I use with my clients is, if you are somebody that is mindlessly eating or emotionally eating, one key thing, and it's something that I read about in a book called The Joy of Half a Cookie. So if any coaches are listening and they want to get into a bit more of the mindful eating space, The Joy of Half a Cookie is a really, really good book. And they use what's called grounding. And this can be used in any situation, not just with food, but grounding basically creates space between a trigger and a reaction. So if you are triggered by something and you find yourself thinking you're going to go to the fridge or you're going to go to the cupboard to get some food, you want to create some space, and you do that by asking yourself questions. So before you go and do that action, you try and say, am I hungry? Am I actually hungry right now? How am I feeling right now? How will I feel if I carry on and do this, what I'm about to do? What do I actually need right now? If yes, you are hungry, as you were, what are you feeling? I'm feeling angry. How are you going to feel if you go and eat a pack of biscuits? Probably annoyed at myself. What do you actually need to do? I need to go and ring my friend and have a rant. Like, that can completely change that set of actions and that set of circumstances. So trying to put that in place, even if it means putting like post-it notes up. My clients have done that, put a post-it note up on their cupboard, and it basically says, how are you feeling? And every time they go, because it is a habit sometimes, if there's like a bowl of biscuits in the middle of the table, like, remove that from your space, make it a little bit harder so you've got that space to think. Another one is avoiding becoming too hungry in general. If you are letting yourself become really ravenous and hungry and you're not eating regularly, that can obviously lead to overeating. So when you do finally sit down and eat a meal, you just tend to go way past what you normally eat because you're so hungry. So we use what's called the hunger scale in my client community. So just throughout the day, kind of rating yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. So 1 being not hungry at all, 10 being I could probably eat a human. Like, you never really, we try and never really get from like between a 4 and a 7. So we don't go below a 4, we don't go above a 7. And that kinds to be the sweet spot. So just checking in with yourself can help you. And if you're somebody that's been kind of chronically dieting and restricting, you might find that this takes time. This might be a practice that you have to do because you won't be in tune with proper hunger and fullness. Again, finding things that satisfy you mentally as well as physically. We talk a lot about like, oh, volume foods and adding more fiber to your meals. Like, we can all do that, but that might be a really boring and bland meal that you don't enjoy. And sometimes when you do that, your brain doesn't switch off its satiety kind of cues because it's thinking, well, I'm not satisfied, I want something else. And that's when we tend to go, right, no, I want something else to eat, I need something else. So making sure that the foods that you're eating are actually tasty and things that you enjoy. Yes, there's going to be times when you're saying no to certain things or reducing certain things, but I think if you're trying to be like this clean eating person, you're opening yourself up to some potential overeating episodes. So keep that in mind. And again, you can use another scale to rate your kind of physical fullness. So as you're eating, maybe before you start eating, in the middle of eating, towards the end of your plate, just saying stuff like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how full am I? And again, 1, not full at all. 10, I'm going to be sick. You don't really want to get above a 7. And that just helps you to be a bit more aware. Trigger foods is a really interesting one. So there's a lot of people, I'm sure you might have clients, Dan, and maybe people listen, have clients that go, I just cannot eat this food because I'll go ham. I'll go full throttle with it. And this comes down to their perception of food. It comes down to them putting labels on food, making things good or bad. And I think as a coach, you really need to encourage the mindset that no foods are good or bad. No foods are off limits. There are foods that are more optimal to eat more of, nutrient-dense foods, but there are also foods that are there for enjoyment. And, you've got to feed your soul as much as you've got to feed your stomach, because otherwise it's never going to stick, and that's not a way to live. So with people that tend to think they've got trigger foods, they tend to think that the way to get over that is to never have it around. I can't have crisps in the cupboard because I'll eat them all. It's like, okay, cool, that works temporarily to remove those crisps. What happens when you step out your house, when we're out of lockdown, and you go around somebody else's house and they've got crisps there? Are you just going to avoid them forever? You're not going to look at them. Like, the best way to stop a food being a trigger food is to repeatedly expose yourself to it until it loses its power and you basically lose interest. Like, try and eat it a few times a week or every day. That's something that I use with my clients. We get them habituated to these foods and they start to realize that there's nothing bad about them. They're not going to gain 20 pounds by eating 1 chocolate bar or 1 cake, but it has to be done in what we call a safe environment. So you don't want to be doing it when you're hungry. You don't want to be doing it when maybe you're out in a different environment. So do it at home. Do it when you are satisfied from your dinner, and try to do it without distraction. So you're really taking in how it tastes and feels. One of my clients has started doing this, and she used to love these little like mini rolls, which are so shit. They're so shit. But she used to overeat them every time she had them because she built them up, these chocolate mini rolls. Now she started practicing this habituation and mindfully eating them. So she'll sit with it, pay attention to how it smells, how it tastes, the texture. She doesn't even fucking like them now. Excuse my French. She doesn't even like them. She's like, now that I've actually paid attention, I'm allowing myself to eat them. I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, it's such a waste. And it's crazy how your perception and your mind can change how you taste and appreciate food. So that's definitely a few things we use.
It's huge. And this whole thing of, I've done a talk on this with my Body Man guys, and nutrition, fat loss is mindset. Like, of course, we've got of course it comes down to nutrition, but it is mindset. It's 100% our outlook and the way that we perceive things. And one of the points Sky said there was absolutely huge. And it's all the way that we talk to ourselves, rather than saying, no, I can't. And this goes for all things in life. Rather than saying, no, I can't, which then immediately is restricting you and thinking you're not allowed to have something. We all want that thing. We all want the forbidden fruit. If there's a sign that says no entry, we all want to go through it. It's just this way that our brain works, right? It's a fact. Our brain works that way. And for us to then restrict ourselves means we're going to want it more. So we just need to frame things differently. And one of the things that I say with the guys is, as soon as they start to say, no, I can't, we change it to, we flip it in their head. The question is, will this bring me happiness? Or will doing this act align with my goals? And it's just a case of knowing yourself, knowing when these situations are potentially going to rise, and planning for them in advance. A lot of planning is so important, because when it comes down to it, in that situation, in the heat of the moment, when you're there fighting with yourself over doing it, majority of the time, the self-sabotage is going to take over. It's the whole chimp paradox. It's the chimp brain 5 times stronger, and it's a lot of the time it's going to take over. So we need to plan in advance, like Sky has said. Sit down with yourself, know when these situations are potentially going to arise, and and then that will give you the tools in order to tackle this. Sky, that was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. I learned all of that. I learned a lot more of that stuff last week, but I feel as if I learned something every single time I listen to you. So it's awesome. And I know that a huge amount of people will have taken a massive value for that. So thank you for being you. Thank you for this journey that you're on to educate and inspire.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming on the show. For anyone that wants to follow you, I've obviously said already, Sky Elizabeth Coaching on Instagram. Anywhere else anyone can find you?
To be honest, I'm pretty much just living on Instagram at the moment. That's my jam. Yeah. So sky.elizabeth.coaching. I spend probably too much time on Instagram. But yeah, I'm not really on Facebook. I just use Facebook for my clients community, really. So yeah, Instagram is the place to find me. I've got an email list and stuff. I tend to send out some sporadic emails, but yeah, mainly my content goes to Instagram, and it's for everybody. It's for coaches and it's for the females that I work with. So I like to think that everybody gets a bit of value, and if not, I at least try and make people laugh now and then.
Amazing, brilliant. Sky, thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, guys, please go check her out. She's amazing at what she does. And yeah, hopefully with more people like her, we can spread some of this education, some of this positivity. So Sky, thank you very much.
That was amazing. My mind is absolutely frazzled after that. That was absolutely brilliant. A massive thank you to Sky. Guys, if you don't already, please follow Sky at sky.elizabeth.coaching on Instagram. Please subscribe to the Truth Be Told podcast. Please follow me on Instagram at Instadan Fitness or on Facebook at Dan Hancock, the Mental Health PT, for all fitness, mental health and lifestyle advice. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. Take care and I'll see you next time.